cortisol, adrenaline, serotonin, dopamine, the rock star of neurotransmitters, endorphins, and oxytocin. How do we design to get the right amount of natural light? The most important thing we can do to maximize the effect, here's a few formulas that we can use to design our homes. Room depth be no greater than 2.5 times the height of the ceiling. If you incorporate just one design principle we've identified today, it was worth a change. One ancient proverb says, "Light is sweet, and it's good to see the sun." Most would agree that sunlight has been associated with happiness since history began. So, with modern science confirming the reasons why natural light is so helpful to us, more people should be happier than ever before, right? Well, in one study by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, an average of 20% of Australians aged 16 to 34 suffer from some kind of high-level mental distress. Part of our project here today is to explore whether increasing daily access to sunlight through good home design can affect that figure, or even partially reduce this shocking 1 in 5 statistic. This episode of the Home Mind Project is a big one, and it's going to be extremely valuable for you if you're interested in understanding how light affects our mental and physical states. But more importantly then, how to apply that understanding to shape our homes so they can shape our well-being for optimal living. Hi, I'm Sam. I've been a building designer in Australia for nearly 20 years, having designed over 1,000 homes to date. I make videos on how homes affect our well-being on the physiological level, and we detail practical formulas that ensures anyone can improve their well-being through thoughtful and intentional home design. Can improved access to natural light really improve your mental health? Before we dive into the home design solutions, it's important to understand the why. The first half of this video covers in detail the way light affects us. Over the next few minutes, you'll discover the remarkable ways that your body reacts to light and the tools it requires to optimize mood and well-being. Then in the second part of this episode, we'll identify the home design solutions that really work. If you want to skip the why and jump to the design solutions, you can jump to the video time point below. So first, it would be helpful to get a basic understanding of light itself. What is light and how does it affect us? Light is electromagnetic energy, and it travels in waves. Blue wavelengths are shorter and red wavelengths are longer. Ultraviolet, UV, infrared wavelengths are above or below the visible light spectrum to the human eyes. Fascinatingly, light changes every cell it touches in some way in our body, and can even penetrate into our body to our internal organs. It's important to note that prolonged exposure to sunlight can damage our bodies in many ways also, so use this information in this episode in conjunction with common sense. In this episode, we'll be talking mostly about natural light, and we'll cover how artificial light affects us in a future episode. How natural light affects your sleep. One of the biggest impacts light has on us is how it affects our sleep and our circadian rhythm, our body's natural daily sleep-wake cycle. I know if I don't get the proper sleep, it affects everything else I do in the day. Do you know that our circadian rhythm is a roughly 24-hour plus 40-minute cycle? So sunlight keeps us in a 24-hour cycle. Without it, we would drift off out of sync with the sun's rising and setting cycle and can develop jet lag-like symptoms. Melatonin is the sleepy hormone that your pineal gland produces. This is a tiny endocrine gland at the back of your hypothalamus area of the brain. It's well established that dim light or lack of light increases levels of melatonin and sleepiness, and bright light actually cancels melatonin production. So timing your exposure to bright light is absolutely crucial for performance during the day, and also for ensuring a good night's sleep. When you wake up in the morning to get the best start to your day, you want to be exposed to bright light as soon as possible to help remove melatonin from your system. And of course, the best form of bright light is the sun. Indoor lights can work, but there is no substitute for our eyes being exposed to sunlight. It's important to note that not only do melatonin levels vary during the day-night cycle, but also have a seasonal or circannual rhythm with higher levels in the autumn and winter when nights are longer, and lower levels in spring and summer. So it's normal to have a little more sleep in winter. Interestingly, one study compared the sleep cycles of office workers having minimal to no exposure to daylight throughout the day with another group with nearby windows and plenty of daylight at their workstations. The study found that the group with windows slept on average 46 minutes longer per night than the group without windows. That is a significant statistic correlation. What about kids? Does light affect kids in the same way? Another study found that primary school students who were exposed to plenty of daylight through large windows actually slept 36 minutes longer than children exposed to very little daylight in the classroom. How natural light affects mood. What about mood? How does natural light affect our mood and alertness levels, and does the timing of natural light matter? To measure this properly, we need to look at a few of the body's main mood-regulating neurotransmitters and hormones. Firstly, our core alertness chemicals, cortisol and adrenaline. And secondly, our four main mood-regulating hormones, serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, and oxytocin, the four feel-good hormones. Cortisol is the stress and alertness hormone. It's an important neurotransmitter that needs to be up sometimes and down at other times. You might think, why would I want to feel stressed? Wouldn't you want this hormone to be as far down as possible? Well, this hormone also drives levels of alertness, physical performance, and productivity. The body spikes cortisol in the morning to wake us up, but lowers it towards the night when we want to relax and sleep. Bright light, the best bright light being the sun, also spikes cortisol. So viewing bright light in the morning is important to get you going, and bright light throughout the day keeps you going. But viewing bright light at night should be avoided because this halts the production of melatonin, the sleepiness-inducing hormone. And this can wake us up when we want to be sleepy. What about adrenaline? One study performed on rats showed that the production of adrenaline, noradrenaline, and corticosterone were directly dependently correlated with the intensity of the light they were exposed to. This is incredible. So the more light, the higher the adrenaline response by the sympathetic nervous system. What about our four main mood-regulating neurotransmitters? Serotonin, endorphins, dopamine, and oxytocin. Well, serotonin produces feelings of happiness and well-being. The most commonly prescribed antidepressant medication is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, which work by increasing levels of serotonin in the brain. Vitamin D3, the active form of vitamin D, is manufactured by your skin when it receives UVB sunlight and interacts with cholesterol molecules in the skin. This also then triggers the production of serotonin, but sunlight must be directly on the skin. Glass filters out UVB light that stimulates the most amount of vitamin D production. 90% of our minimum vitamin D needs can be met by just 6% of our skin receiving sunlight for 5 to 10 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week. More time in the sun equals more vitamin D3, more serotonin, stronger feelings of peace, contentment, and well-being. Now, dopamine is the rock star of neurotransmitters and the hormone most popularly talked about in media. It's the feel-good, reward, and craving hormone. Studies have found that light exposure can affect dopamine levels. One fascinating study in 2004 in rats found that dopamine may even have a circadian or daily rhythm, and that this rhythm seemed to be influenced by light exposure. The interesting thing about this study was that when the subjects were kept under constant dark conditions, this dopamine rhythm was non-existent. So, this leads us to conclude that light can boost dopamine. Does this mean that we should look for constant exposure to light to keep our mood elevated, i.e. the TikTok effect? No. Another study found that constant artificial light could indirectly modify and damage dopamine neurons, and that excessive artificial light could be an adjunctive environmental risk factor for Parkinson's disease. Endorphins help relieve pain, reduce stress, and improve your sense of well-being. Studies have shown that UV light interacting with the skin produces beta endorphins, with one study even showing that UV light-induced skin endorphin production can even be addictive. In the study, when the UV light was removed, this instigated an opioid-like withdrawal response, suggesting that consistent UV exposure might elicit an addictive mechanism, making you want more sun. Oxytocin is often called the love hormone because it plays a key role in the bonding between close relationships between a mother and child, close friendships, and romantic relationships and interactions. Research around how to trigger oxytocin release has shown that oxytocin is directly activated and controlled by vitamin D. Remember, this is the vitamin that your skin synthesizes when exposed to sunlight. And some studies specifically around vitamin D deficiency and autism have found a direct correlation between vitamin D levels and the ability to emotionally bond with others. And so, it would seem, stable oxytocin levels will likely engender more feelings of bonding within your close relationships. Now, we could talk for hours about the myriad of ways that natural light improves our mental, physical, and emotional health and well-being, But let me boil down many of the effects of natural light on our bodies and then give you dedicated home design formulas based on this latest scientific data and neuroarchitecture practice. Here are some other ways that light can affect us. We mentioned before, it helps us sleep better by regulating our circadian rhythm. It can help reduce chronic pain and inflammation through increases in enkephalin and other endogenous hormones. For example, one study in 2000 found bright light exposure reduced chronic headaches in children. Light can boost immune function. Your spleen and immune function are enhanced by light. The brain actually connects to your spleen, and UVB light arriving at your eyes is known to activate the sympathetic nervous system. When we get sufficient light in our eyes, our spleen is activated by this part of our nervous system and then releases so-called killer cells that scan for and combat infection. It's also well known that wound healing is faster and pain thresholds are higher when we're getting sufficient UVB light and vitamin D from the sun. Did you know hair and nail growth can even be accelerated by UVB exposure to the skin and eyes because the body will recycle and produce new cells when we're getting sufficient light to our skin and eyes? And lastly, UVB light exposure to the skin increases both testosterone and estrogen levels in both women and men. If you're interested, I'll put links to all the studies referred to in this video in the description if you want to read those studies individually. And like the video if you've learned something up till now. All of these mental and physical benefits can be captured in your body through simply viewing sunlight in the eyes and skin for 5 to 15 minutes on clear days or 20 minutes or so on overcast days. Now, how can we take this information, research, and design practical solutions for our homes? Designing around the science to optimize our minds, our bodies, our well-being, and productivity. The how. How do we design to get the right amount of natural light at the right times of day? The most important thing we can do to maximize the effect of natural light is to get outside more. Ideally, it's a reasonable amount of UVB or short wavelength light that is the most biologically active wavelength of the ultraviolet spectrum. Generally, most glass is designed to reduce or shield us from these beneficial light waves. So it's important that this light is to hit our skin and eyes, not through glass. Of course, never look directly at the sun. So the best recommendation is actually not specifically building design advice because you need to get out of the building to take maximum advantage of the sunlight. But we're all human and we're all busy. You might be saying, I just don't get 10 to 20 minutes to spend outside and spend in the sun. Well, to make this happen, we have to design our buildings and interiors to draw us out of doors more. And you might be surprised where you can schedule in that 10 minutes each day to get outside. If there are days when you just simply don't get time to get this exposure to sunlight directly for long enough, you can still maintain some of the antidepressant benefits of bright light exposure just by opening up all the windows to get as much light brightness into the room as possible. Fortunately, in addition to this direct sunlight exposure, having access to the right amount of natural light for the task the room's designed for can go a long way towards improved well-being. We're not talking about artificial light today because that's an entirely different subject alone, and we'll cover that in a future episode. But it is worth noting that artificial light is usually nowhere near bright enough to trigger improved vitality and mood when compared to sunlight. Most overhead lighting doesn't usually exceed 100 to 200 lux, but even on an overcast day outside, the intensity of brightness is often at least 10,000 lux. This is a screenshot from a light intensity measuring app on my phone at 6:30 AM on a cloudy morning at sunrise. The point is, artificial light simply cannot compete with the brightness levels of natural light. Let's get to the formulas now to design for regular daily sunlight exposure, all broken down into the varying design investment levels that we talked about in our last episode. Remember to do the lowest cost items first, the highest value changes first, because all of these apply to new home designs as well. The first investment level of improvements is the low to no budget improvements. Firstly, we can open the curtains as a part of our morning routine and open a door or window every morning. Even if it's cold, you can layer up and acclimatize. Because if you can see and feel the outside world, you're more likely to be drawn outside more often. Whether it's a few weeds you can see in the garden that might need pulling, or you see a nice spot of sunlight on the lawn that you can stand in with your morning coffee, the more you see the outdoors, the more likely you are to go there. Secondly, rearrange your furniture to make sure no furniture is covering any parts of the available windows And make sure you maintain a clear and open path from anywhere in the home to the external doors. If you have to jump over 10 different things to get to the back door, it's likely you won't want to go outside. Another thing we can do is position full-length mirrors to reflect light from other lighter parts of the home into dark areas. This can help direct light into rooms that would otherwise struggle to receive natural light. And it can also help with small spaces to make them feel larger. Another thing we could do is put a permanent lawn or balcony chair outside in the sun. If there's a chair there, you'll be more likely to go out to it, because we as humans are drawn to structure and place when we rest. Make a place and it'll feel like your own space. Now we can move on to the next level of home improvement investment. These are low to mid-budget improvements for renters and homeowners. Firstly, window covering selection. Make sure your curtains or blinds are the type that can open up all the way and not leave half the window covered or a third of the window in the case of some blinds. It's even better if they have technically 3 settings for lighting control. So setting 1 would be complete blockout. Now this is important for shift workers or if you have a lot of artificial light outside at night so that we can maintain a high melatonin level when we want to sleep. We think that every window should have the complete blockout option, but especially bedrooms. Setting 2 would be a sheer type of blind or curtain that lets light in but maintains some privacy. These can be used in areas where maybe people could see into your window or you don't want to see the view that's outside of your window. These can also help diffuse harsh light from direct sun during certain parts of the day to reduce glare. And glare is an interesting subject because it's detrimental to our comfort, our mood and health. More on that in another episode. This is ideal to include specifically on north and west facing windows in the southern hemisphere and south or west facing windows in the northern hemisphere. Setting 3 for these curtains would be fully open with no part of the window covered. This is the ideal option for maximum light because it also naturally sustains our cortisol and adrenaline levels, which will improve your alertness and productivity in the rooms that are designed for it. If you have views to trees or nature, this is worth its weight in gold for well-being. It's a subject which we'll cover in more detail in a future episode talking about biophilic design. Secondly, the furniture you choose can either reflect a lot of light or absorb a lot of light, depending on the color and texture. If we're looking to let as much light in as possible, the lighter the furniture color, the more light will be reflected around the room. This might not work if you have young kids or a red wine spilling habit, so choose carefully. Some furniture can be stain resistant or be easily wiped or cleaned. Again, with positioning, make sure the furniture is positioned so that it doesn't block any potential window light. If productivity is the aim of the room, position your work desk near a window so that you can benefit from natural effects of alertness that the sunlight brings. You'll be more productive, and so long as glare is controlled, your mood will have a higher likelihood of still being elevated at the end of the day. Now we move into our highest cost home improvement category. This is for those that are designing or renovating their own home. Ideally, we try to design the natural light of most rooms so that you don't automatically feel compelled to turn artificial lights on during the day, other than task lighting. If you feel you need to turn a light on at midday, you most likely don't have enough natural light in the space. Firstly, we'll talk about site selection, building orientation, and room positioning. If you have a building site large enough that you can orientate the home any way you like, this gives you the most amount of freedom to design according to the natural light of the site. If this is the case for you, try to place the rooms that require the most amount of natural light towards the northern side in the southern hemisphere or the south side in the northern hemisphere. We'll call this the light side of the house. This will maximize the most access to light through windows, glass doors, and skylights. Then, the light can be more finely tuned through your light control elements that we talked about before, our different settings, through our window coverings, our blinds and shears. Most people building their own home, however, might be limited to a standard rectangular site in a suburban estate, or if you're buying an established house, the following can also apply. When looking for a site or house to buy, look for a site that allows for the ideal positioning of living areas in terms of views and privacy, to have an outlook towards the lighter side of the house, and the bedrooms towards the darker side of the house. If site selection in your desired area is tight, or you don't have a wide choice of sites, or the best views are in the opposite direction to the best light, we can still find ways to maximize light into the rooms that need it the most through an intentional layout design. Glass windows and doors. The sizing and locating of windows should be designed according to the room depth, room use, and required brightness levels. There needs to be a fine balance between light, glare, solar heat gain coefficients. This is how much heat or cold is transmitted through the glass, and this is significantly affected by orientation to north, whether you're in the northern or southern hemisphere, the local climate, and the season, and the external shading of the window through eaves, awnings, trees, or other buildings. Vitruvius, a 1st century architect, recommended that room depth be no greater than 2.5 times the height of the ceiling. Well, this holds up fairly well today, but we recommend using the window head height as the guide instead of the ceiling height. There was an in-depth study done at a Sydney university that explored rules of thumb for window sizing. What about sill height then? To address this, another study was conducted which showed that a 900mm sill height, or 90 centimeters, seems to strike the best balance between light distribution and glare. You can then vary the width of the window according to the room. Remember, window size solutions vary with the parameters of the room they're lighting, so consider each room individually as a natural lighting tool according to the room. Skylights. Skylights are the best way to get a direct distribution of natural lighting into the space. If they're placed centrally in the room, they provide the best light distribution for even room lighting. Of course, the positioning of skylights is usually affected by a few factors, like other ceiling fixtures, fans, lights, ducts, smoke alarms, and the use of the room. Skylights are better located in rooms that are not designed for sleeping or moodiness, but wakefulness and productivity, like kitchens, hallways, living rooms, and offices. And with skylights, let's talk about selective natural task lighting. If a room is designed around specific activities, like an office, you can selectively locate skylights to highlight certain parts of the room, where direct overhead light would be welcome, like directly over a desk or a workbench. It's also important to think about control with skylights. In most cases where a room has multiple uses that might require different lighting levels, it's important to be able to control that lighting through skylights that might integrate a blind or lighting control mechanism, to be able to vary or completely block out the light from the skylight, depending on the activity of the room. Of course, we can't talk about interior light without touching on paint selection. Now, this subject is entirely subjective, but to put together a simple formula and more directly related to light rather than personal preference, lighter colors will help bounce more light around an interior, and darker colors will result in less light distribution and a darker room. You might want a darker room in some cases. However, in most rooms, all white colour schemes are going to feel clinical and uninviting. For a nice balance of natural light distribution, it's good to identify the use of the room, the intended mood and feeling that you want to create, and then choose your paint colour carefully. For a typical living area, we generally lean towards a 70% dominant lighter colour for the walls and ceiling and general furnishing selections, and then 20% complementary darker shade of that colour, maybe a feature wall or a darker shade of rug or sofa, and a 10% feature colour to add the final spice or focal point to the room. Let's talk about outdoor living areas. The whole idea of this episode is to get you out of the building and to draw in as much light as possible into the spaces we occupy. We need to create an indoor-outdoor connection, and one of the best ways to do this is to make the outside easily accessible from as many rooms as possible. So as a design solution, try to configure the most important rooms of the house so they have easy direct access to an outdoor area like a balcony, a veranda, or an outdoor alfresco area, ideally with a garden or area off to the side that might be open to the sky. So whichever rooms you're waking in, working in, or relaxing in, try to provide some kind of outdoor connection that has direct exposure to sunlight. There's so many ways to do this, so I'd love to hear how you've incorporated an outdoor connection to your rooms by sharing your story in the comments below. We'll cover more design solutions for access to light in future episodes, and a Home Mind Design online course will be developing in the near future. In conclusion, based on the incredible research and information currently available that we have at our fingertips, I'm confident that together we can help reduce at least some level of mental distress experienced one person at a time by helping shape one home at a time through awareness and understanding of how our spaces affect our physiology and the home design principles that can help optimize our well-being for higher productivity and performance in all your endeavors. Even if you incorporate just one design principle we've identified today and it improves your day by 1%, it was worth the change. My hope is that from the benefits you discover through driving this change, this will encourage you to adopt another home design well-being optimization formula. Remember the ancient proverb, light is sweet and it is good to see the sun. But have you ever wondered, what does your home say about your personality? In our next episode of the Home Mind Project, we'll explore what your home says about you. Are you a neat freak? Or do you thrive on organized chaos? Your home space has a strong effect on your psychological space. In what way? And how can we improve it through good home design? Make sure you subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on the answers coming. The answers to these questions could change the way you live. Remember, we shape our homes, then they shape us. I'm Sam, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Home Mind Project.